That's not right.
Yes, it is.
Today is a spotlight panel with two of my favorite writers that are working now, and that's an amazing thing. And you all are here in the room to listen to them talk about whatever you guys want and kind of what I want as a moderator. My name is Sean Speakman. I am writer of The Dark Thorn, editor of the Unfettered Anthology series, and among other things that we won't go into, I wear a lot of hats. And sitting next to me is Ann Bishop.
Hey. No, no, no. If we're going to do this, the pack must howl. It's
And Patricia Briggs. Howl. So we're going to talk about their new books, one of which is already out. Wild Country by Anne is already out in bookstores. If you haven't bought your copy, you can go buy a copy, and I'm sure she'll sign it for you, and you'll be happy. And Patty's book comes out on May 7th, I think?
Yes.
Yeah, Storm Curse comes out May 7th. So normally they both have books out at the same time, but we're switching it up, apparently, at the publisher.
No, it's not the publisher. It was me. I'm sorry.
I was trying to be nice.
But I've already read it, and it's awesome.
I pay her to say that.
So
you paid me in cookies.
that is
right.
valid currency.
Yes.
That's right. So we'll start with Anne since her book's out now. Why don't you talk about the others a little bit? I mean, all of you guys probably read all the books, right? So this is a weird spotlight panel for me because we all know that you guys read everything within a day, right? Every book that comes out. But I figure I'll let her, for those of you who don't know, let her discuss the others and Wild Country specifically.
Well, the others is my take on the supernatural, which was that the beings that were normally considered werewolves and vampires were not humans that were changed. They were another species that evolved as the dominant predators of this world. And then the question is, how can humans survive when everything is out to eat you? But with Wild Country specifically, what I was playing with was, because I tend to blend genres. I don't mean to do this, but I just do, because that's the way my brain works, and it goes, well, wouldn't this be fun? And it does sound like fun, and so I do it. And then they say, but people don't do that, and go, well, be that a lesson to you who want to write, is when they say people don't do that, you just say, So Wild Country is a blend of the Western genre and the supernatural genre, because I wanted that kind of Western feel with the gunslingers and the gamblers and almost like a gold rush town, and then the werewolves and vampires and supernatural beings who are, some of them are much scarier than werewolves and vampires. So I had a lot of fun with kind of channeling all of the things I remember from the Westerns that I loved when I was much younger, and then bringing that part into the world of the others.
Don't go, Shane. Don't go. No. Nobody laughed.
Go,
Nobody
Shane,
knows that
we'll eat
Western
you.
anymore. Yeah, go, Shane, we'll eat you.
Didn't everybody read that book?
Yeah.
High school? Sorry?
Go ahead.
All right. My name's Patricia Briggs. My book coming out is Storm Cursed, which is, I think, book 11 in the Mercy Thompson series. Thank you. Sparky is my brains, and she tells me these things. Once you get so far along, you forget to keep track. And I've been known to forget my own titles, too. So there you go. But I do remember my characters always. Storm Cursed is a new chapter in the Mercy Thompson series, and it's... well, I'll just read you the back, because we talked back and forth, and Ann Sowers, my editor, had to put the blurb on it before the book was written. And so I said, you know what, it's just easier, let me write it for you. So this is my blurb that I wrote for the book. My name is Mercedes Athena Thompson Houtman, and I'm a car mechanic and a coyote shapeshifter, and the mate of the Alpha of Columbia Basin Werewolf Pack. Even so, none of that would have gotten me into trouble if, a few months ago, I hadn't stood on a bridge and taken responsibility for the safety of the citizens who live in our territory. It seemed like the thing to do at the time. It should only have involved hunting down killer zombies, goblins, and an occasional troll. Instead, our home was viewed as neutral ground, a place where humans would feel safe to come and treat with the Fae. The reality is that nothing and no one is safe. As generals and politicians face off with the Grey Lords of the Fae, a storm is coming and her name is death. But we are Pack, and we have given our word, and we will die to keep it. So this book's about the witches.
It's awesome.
This book is about the witches, and the witches in my world are very creepy, scary things. The black witches. Sorry, we have white witches and gray witches and black witches, and the white witches are fodder. and the gray witches are scary, and the black witches are even scarier. And I had a really good time writing this book. It's pretty creepy. And Larry is back. For those of you who remember Larry, the Goblin King, he's back.
So both of your books, your new books, are part of series. What is it like writing in a continuous series? What does it allow you as an author? What does that allow you to do in a creative way?
For me, it's just been a continuum of telling stories, but it allows you to have characters that you love, that you get to know, and that you can explore in depth. And with each book, you find out a little bit more about the world and the people and the dangers of what lives there. So that for me was interesting, because the dynamics of Wild Country is that the elders and the others who live around the town of Bennett are much more feral than the ones who lived around the lakeside courtyard. They've never wanted to be around humans, and they're rather resentful that they have to be. So their relationship is very different, and it brings another piece of tension into an already tense world.
And when you're building each individual book's arc, how far forward do you know about your characters and where they're going to end up? Like, did you know that, the characters in this book will be where they're at now compared to the last book when you finished it?
Well, this Wild Country is kind of a standalone, because the people are going to a town that was, all of the citizens were killed. And so they are going in to settle basically a ghost town. And so there's that newness of going to a new place, a different place, a challenge. And it's a fresh start, both for some of the characters and for me and for readers. So outside of knowing that Deputy Jana was going to be on the train and heading to Bennett, there wasn't a whole lot that I needed to know when I started, which is why it took me a while to actually find that story.
So, so this is the 11th book in a series, and I have 2 series going, and they're both kind of concurrent. So it's almost 20 books into this world building. And what I find that it has allowed me to do is that I have side characters that people love better than my main characters. And I do too. I mean, I not better, but I have characters that I love that I would never have been able to do in a regular size novel. A friend of mine, CJ Cherry, says that you need 100 pages to fully flesh out a character. And so in an average size novel, you have room for 3, maybe 4 fully fleshed out characters, and everybody else are side characters. When you're writing a series like that, you end up with a whole cast. I probably have 25, 30 characters that are fully fleshed out, and people know, and I have people writing to me and asking me if I will write books about them or if I'll kill them off, one of the two. So that's really cool. The thing that's harder is that I wrote the first Mercy book in I think 2003 or 4 back. So that's a long time ago now, about 15 years now. And I have found that I forget some things, and people remind me when I forget some things. They remind me very quickly. So I have a couple of toolboxes. I have a really couple wonderful people who have nothing better to do with their time, apparently know my books better than I know them. And I make them go through. Sparky's one of them, and Linda Campbell from Canada, who is one of my moderators. If you're on Facebook, you'll know her as Elle. The two of them read it before it goes to publication, so they can check it for continuity. The other thing I've been doing is I've been listening to them on audiobooks. I live outside of town and I drive a lot, so I run them on audiobooks, just one right after the other, and I find that I pick up things that even if I sat down and read them, I wouldn't, because I tend to read pretty fast, and I miss things. So that has helped a lot too. So it's kind of good and bad that you have series going, and the good is that you have these wonderful characters and world building, and I can keep background story arcs going for a long period of time through multiple novels. So Burn Bright and Storm Curse, both of them. Burn Bright is the last one, my last book, which was an Alpha and Omega book, and Storm Curse both go back to very early books and pull some themes and some things the characters didn't know enough to tell, that I could tell the reader what was really going on. So with Storm Curse and Burn Bright, I was able to bring that forward so that you could figure out what's going on. One of the challenges to writing series books, and for me, it's very important to me that each book is a standalone. This is not like a trilogy. This is each book is a standalone, more like maybe what they do with like detective novels. So the challenge then is to write a book that somebody can pick up fresh who's never read any of my books, and at the same time not bore to death with the introductions of characters, the people that have read the last 10 books maybe last week when they pick up the new book. And it's fun. I'm up to it. I like challenges. I get bored easily, so it's a good time. But series are different, definitely, than writing just a standalone novel.
Do you either of you ever have a story idea that you feel like wouldn't fit in with what you're currently writing, and it's just sitting back there waiting to be told, and it has to take the back seat for however long your contract is with your publisher?
Well, for me, that was the new Black Jewels novel, because it had to wait about 4 years while I was writing the books in the other series that I knew about. But if that idea of a spin-off of books, that's because of you.
Placing blame.
Because I realized that when with Patty's books, when you have the Mercies and the Alpha and Omega, but these are people who know each other. They're interconnected. They talk to each other. They are not in the same stories necessarily, unless they have like a little guest appearance or something. But they add depth to the world because they're all in communication. So you feel like you know different places in passing. And in a sense, when I launched off with Wild Country, I realized that that's kind of what I was doing, is setting up a different place for this group of characters to tell their stories, but they would still be interconnected with everyone we had already known.
It's part of making your world feel real. I like to write a book that you feel like their characters' lives continue after the book is over, and that there are things going on in the world on the outside, right? Mm-hmm. And doing these sides, so the side series or side novels and set in the same world, that's really fun, and it really does make, for me as well as hopefully for your readers, it really does make it feel like the world is a bigger place, and it just gives an additional depth into it. You know, if you're watching Batman, it's kind of cool to know that there's also so you're watching Gotham City. There's also a Metropolis, right, in the same world. It makes the world feel bigger, and as writers, that's fun. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll, I kind of want, we ran out of time on the last panel for answering questions a little bit. So if you have a question, feel free to stand up to the mic in the middle of the room, and because I really want to answer as many questions as possible, well, at least let these fine writers do it.
Oh.
Okay.
That was fast.
Anybody
That didn't take long.
else?
All right, go ahead. Yes.
Hi, my name is Stephanie, and this is okay. And I was wondering, when you guys are writing your antagonists and your villains, where do you pull from? Maybe specifically to these books that have come out and are coming out.
Could you enunciate a little bit better? I'm having a hard time hearing.
So when you write your villains or your antagonists in your books, and probably specifically to these books, where do you pull from? Because you both seem like lovely people, and some of your antagonists aren't. So maybe just like where those complexities come from.
I believe that we are capable of every emotion possible. And we choose the facets of ourselves that we will promote and encourage and grow. So, in a sense, you just look into yourself for the villains because you are capable of thinking of the worst things possible. You choose not to do them, but you could come up with the weird things, and if not, all you have to do is pick up any book in history, and you can get scared enough of that. But for me, I found that,
There's a dark little corner in your heart.
there is a dark little corner in all of us, and you just open that door to find your villains, because you can look at the world and think of it from their point of view. It is not a comfortable place to be, but that's where I find them.
So there's a number of kinds of villains, and after you've written as many books as Anna and I have written, you end up using them all. So you have the villains that just want something different than your main character does. They're just convinced that the world's going to end if they can't change things that your main character doesn't want to change, or something like that. You use the word antagonist. They're just somebody who wants something different from your main character. If you're writing urban fantasy, that may be that they want to kill all the babies in the world, or something like that, right? There's also, recognizing, you look for what the worst could possibly be, or you look for what would be terrible, but maybe not to the nth degree, just a terrible thing to happen to a person. I also look at what my protagonists want and what they'll protect more than anything else, and I figure out ways to take that away from them. And all of those things work. Villains are as common as your next door neighbor.
Oh, no.
Right?
Where's my neighbor? He's back there.
What is that great quote? I looked around and realized that the evil was right next door. I'm trying to remember what that was from. It was about the Nazis and about the Nazi sympathizers. And the banality of evil, something on the banality of evil, how common it is. The other thing, because of what I write, I look to fairy tales. And a lot of my villains I pull directly from other people's stories. So Guayota came from the Canary Islands, and he was, in the Canary Islands, he's viewed as a scary creature. And I just took him out of his element and made him hopefully a little more sympathetic, so people understood where he was and what he wanted and why he was screwed up. But it's, I don't know, writing villains is a challenge sometimes. You don't want to just have the next big bad guy in your next book, or people quit reading. They'll tell you that's what they want, but they'll quit reading because they get bored. And worse, I get bored. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello. My question, as a writer, I get so lost into my characters and my world that sometimes maybe because I was stuck in my head too much as a kid, or, the imagination just blurs with reality and I think I'm walking next to a werewolf. But how do you create a world that, and do you get stuck in it? Do you get stuck in it even after you're done writing? You're just at home and you're just well, I wonder what Mustard Thompson's doing right now. What do you do about that? How do you feel about that?
A story is always simmering in the background of once you start it. So what you're describing is not unusual. I'm going, okay? Because once the writing day is done for me, and I'm going to do the laundry or get some groceries or pay the bills, the story is still simmering. And if something pops up and I go, oh, that would be a good idea, or this is something that character realizes, you make a note, and then you go on and do the mundane stuff to let your brain rest. But always thinking about it, that's not, I mean, that's what we do. We're writers.
Yeah.
I saw a little poster that said, you know, you are a writer, the normal ship left without you long ago. And
Yeah, I find it really useful to keep grounded, though, because I was talking to another writer. She might be in here. Well, anyway, I won't use names. But I was talking to another writer, and she talks about how she will write till she drops. And that's not really healthy, and you can't maintain that forever. I mean, eventually that means you'll burn out. Mm-hmm. So I look for things to keep a balance in my life. I do horses. And horses are like the opposite of writing. When I'm writing, I'm in my head, I'm sitting down, I'm usually in a room with the curtains all pulled down because I don't want to distract myself, and music blaring because I don't want noise to distract me, and all of that. And when I'm doing the horses, which I have to do every day, I have to go out and feed them morning and night. I get up and I go outside and I haul hay and I haul grain and I groom horses and I do all the outside exercise, get out of my house so that I don't turn into a million-pound couch potato in front of my computer. And I find it's very useful to get out and get some fresh air and get a little exercise. And with horses, you have to always be aware of what's going on. So it's very external. You have to watch their body language, because I have young horses, and you have to make sure that you don't get, for not a random example, run over and have your jaw broken. Which happened, right? So we don't do that anymore. But I think it's very important to maintain balance. Don't let your books, your writing, isolate you from your friends, because remember, your stories come from the real world. And there's only so many stories you can pull from your head if you don't actually get out there and live your life. And it's a temptation as writers, most of us are introverts, that it's an excuse to stay away and say, oh, I don't want to go out with my friends. I'll just stay home and write, and it'll be awesome. And I'll have a better time with myself and my imaginary friends, which is true sometimes. But you do have to get out and you have to do things. And so a balance is really important.
Yeah, Terry Brooks wrote a memoir writing guide, probably 15 years ago now, and the opening chapter title is I'm Not All Here. And it's because he is literally, when he's around his family, he will be thinking about the story the work that he's going to do the next day, and he's tried to learn over the years, and not probably very well, to separate himself and have family time as well as the writing time. There's obviously a percolation that always happens with writers, and I feel like that's really important. So yeah, that's totally normal. You're one of us.
I'm glad to be a part of the team. Thank you.
Thank you.
This question is specifically for Anne. You've teased us that you're going back to the Black Jewels world. I was wondering if you could fill us in on maybe what timeline or which characters that's going to involve.
The timeline is a few months after the story of the High Lord's daughter. So it follows where we left them. And I can tell you that Lucifer and Damon are back.
Yay.
So
Thank you.
Sneaky question, good one.
I have a question for Patricia. I found your books back in '08, and really soon after I read the first of the Mercy Thompsons, I found your first books, which was Mask and Wolfsbane. And at the end of Wolfsbane, I've had this question in my head ever since I read them, so that's been a while. It hints at the dreamer at the end of Wolfsbane. Are you ever going to answer the question what he is, and or that being, and will we ever go back to that world of
The sign-in world?
yeah, and like how manipulative the dreamer is, and how much he's actually influenced a lot of the events in that.
Right. So I wrote the first 4 or 5 novels. Mask, Steal the Dragon, Wolfsbane. I'm missing one.
The Demons.
When Demons Walk, thank you. I wrote those first 4 novels when I was in my early 30s.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about what I was doing. And as a 50-something, it's really hard to go back and step right directly in there. And then I know some world-building errors that I made now. And knowing myself, I would just, if I ignored them, that'd be fine, but I'm just going to start picking at them because that's what writers do. I'm not sure I can write another novel in that universe, but what I've decided I'm going to do at some point when I have a little extra time and life quits happening, I'm going to start writing some short stories set in that universe. So another, Riala, another Chimera, another R.R. Lauren short story. And just maybe do a short story collection of all the other books that are not Mercy Thompson books, just for fun. And I will do another book, given as long as I don't get hit by a bus. I'll do another Dragon Bones book. I'll do another Raven book. In fact, maybe another Raven trilogy with different characters, because that world is better realized than some of the others. But it's really, going backwards is really hard. I learned that when I tried to revise Masks. That is the single hardest thing I ever did. I thought it would be an easy, it's a book. It's already polished. All I need to do is go in and fix and tweak a little bit, and we can republish it. And it took me longer to do that than it does to write a normal novel. And I was less happy with the result at the end. So, yeah, we'll have to see. And maybe I'll write a story about the Dreamer so that people can get that question answered.
Well, thank you, because that's one of my favorites out of yours, even though I know it's really early.
You.
So it's been there. I'm like, I wonder. So
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Hi, this is for Patricia. We've all heard about Mercy's pranks over the years. I was wondering if we were going to get more details on the Easter Bunny incident.
I will, I promise. And I will, not this book, but I promise. Yeah, it gets mentioned in this book, but I have 2 or 3 things that she could have done with an Easter bunny. I just have to say I was in a high school band, and that's all I have to tell some of you. And that's where I get a lot of my pranks. And my husband was a scientist, and I get some of them from him too. I can make you pee blue for the rest of your life if you don't pay attention, right? So, that was really, I love her pranks, and there will be more. Yeah.
Okay.
And once I explain the Easter Bunny incident, I'll find something else to make you wonder with.
So as a writer, I find that I have a hard time focusing on one project, and I'm wondering if that's something that everyone struggles with.
When I was first starting, that was true. Over the years, and the fear of missing deadlines has done wonders for my focus.
And your mortgage.
And my mortgage. So I don't have that bouncing around that I used to, where you'd start and you'd write 5 pages and then you'd get to the tough part and then you'd quit and you'd find something new that was sparkly and shiny. Now I have the story that I need to write, because this is the story I promised my editor that I was going to turn in. So that's not, I don't do that anymore.
So I haven't had that problem, and I think it's because I get involved with my characters, and I want to see what happens. The only book I had trouble writing, the book I had the most trouble writing, other than revising Masks, was I sold Raven's Strike was the first book I sold with an outline, and I found it was really hard to write because I knew how it ended. Because that's what drives me. When I start writing a story, I really want to know how it ends up and how all the characters end up and what happens. And so for me, that keeps me focused, because and if I find I'm losing my focus, it means I've done something wrong in the story. I have to go back and tighten something up or make somebody else do something else, because it means the story is losing its tension. And I use that actually as a cue that I'm doing something wrong in the book. But generally speaking, I'm pretty focused. I could not write 2 novels at the same time, although I do know people like Sean McGuire, I think he writes a couple novels at the same time. It would make me crazy. I couldn't do that.
So you're not an outliner then?
No,
Now?
I'm a pantser.
Yeah, you're a pantser. What about
I have outlined once. I've committed outline once, and I will never do it again. But I'm a focused pantser, so you might even say that I'm always outlined, but my outline is my first draft, and then I just go and expand the first draft, and then I cut it down again in edits.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I call myself an organic writer because I don't outline. For the same reason, I always have an idea of the ending that I'm writing toward. It may not necessarily be the ending that I end up with, but I have one that I'm writing toward. And my incentive is to find out how they get there.
Yeah.
But I don't really write anything down until I'm writing the first draft, because the need to find out what happens is the reason to turn on the computer in the morning and get started. So.
Well, you both just basically answered my question, so thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Weren't we efficient?
In panels in the past, especially at the UW bookstore, you've talked about, especially for Mercy, how they're like kids. You'd love for her to have children, but that doesn't really write well into story. Could we maybe get some short stories called Wishful Thinking?
Oh,
And
I see.
just
I
do
see where
different little things?
I see where you're going, and I can't write that way. I have to write. It's really hard for me to write like prequels, and it's really hard for me to write if I'm not writing in sequence with the characters, because I have the. Sounds really stupid, but to me the characters are like musical compositions in my head. I know who they are right now at this moment, and because I have like 10 books behind me, if I lose that, I'm sunk. Because the characters to me are organic things, and they change as they go. And if I did a wish fulfillment story that takes place 5 or 10 years down the road, that Mercy is not going to be the same Mercy that's right here. And I will have a really hard time going back to this one and then moving her to that place. And I choose not to torture myself more than necessary. But I will tell you, as I think I've said before, in the weird world that is in my head, Mercy's world is real. And in that real world, I know she and Adam have kids, and they regret it deeply. Sometimes. But I don't know that will ever make it into a story, just simply because if I do that, I think that would be the end of the series, because I can't see Mercy as a character going hell-bent for leather the way she does, getting herself in trouble the way she does, when her job is taking care of those kids, because she has abandonment issues herself. Anna and Charles could, but Mercy can't.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry.
Don't worry. Thank you, though.
I'm ashamed to admit I cannot remember Mercy's cat's name right now.
Madea.
Madea, that's right. I love Madea, and I suspect strongly that she's not an ordinary cat, and not an unordinary cat in the usual way. So I don't really want to know, because that will spoil the surprise, but is Madea a really, really unusual cat?
So I never make promises of things that are not already in print. Okay, but I will tell you my initial footprint or prototype for Madea was a cat we inherited from my husband's parents. Her name was Alana. We called her Witch Kitty. She was a short-tailed Manx, and Manx, like Siamese, are not normal cats. They have their own things they do. They're very vocal, and they're very person-friendly. They really, really love their people, and they don't like other cats or dogs or anything. We called her Witch Kitty because we had 2 other cats at the time, and she was awful to them. If she were more than 5 pounds, she would have ruled the roost. But the other cats were like 15 and 16 pounds, so she had no chance. However, all things are possible, and there's nothing I've done in the series so far that would mean that I can't do something like that. I just don't know that I will. How's that?
That's perfect.
Thank you.
All right, we're through the questions for now. Hopefully, a couple more people will stand up and have them. What do you read outside of? Do you guys read outside of the genre?
Oh yeah.
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 Yeah, how does that affect your writing? And what are you looking for when you do that? Is it purely entertainment, or is it trying to, I guess, stoke the fires of creativity in some way?
Well, both, but I like series or stories where the characters are engaging and the writing is engaging, and I can also learn something from it. I love Louise Penny. If any of you have read the Gamache, the Three Pines Mysteries, she is wonderful, and the characters are wonderful and quirky, and this whole little village is just great. You have a demented poet whose pet is a duck.
I'm getting a duck tomorrow.
And the writing is just wonderful. So I go there as a place to visit and relax and just hang out with these characters and have fun. So mysteries, romances. When I was writing the others' books, I couldn't read urban fantasy except for Patty's because her voice was not something that derailed me. And then I read some of the nonfiction stuff in order to just learn about things.
Yeah, I read a lot, and some of it I do because I feel like I have a cup inside me that's full of creative power, right? Creative juices, however you want to say it. And it as I write, it empties, and I fill it with other people's creations. So I read a lot. I read westerns and mysteries and romances and thrillers and it just depends, young adult. It just depends on what mood strikes me at the time. I also read not as much, but I read some nonfiction, things that just catch my eye. Sometimes I'm doing a little research. I read a lot of fairy tales. I read a lot of, go back and reread my favorite books over and over again. Georgette Heir's, let's see, Madam, say it again? Jeffrey Furnall, who's another romance writer, another Regency writer. He actually predates Georgette Heir, and nobody knows him now, but at one point in time, he was the best-selling novelist in the world. And his are really fun because he has, all of his chapters have headings like, which concerns a finger post, or which concerns a rusty nail in the wall. And it will, or which the reader might skip because it has to do with love and anguish and not much to do with the plot, so you can skip it if you would like, things like that. They're really fun. But I think that the biggest thing to tell readers, and I tell them all the time, is read outside your genre. Read inside your genre so that you know what has been done, so you know where the power of your genre comes from, what people are looking for out of your genre. But yeah, I read everything I can get my hands on, and I'm really grateful. I had about 2 years that I had trouble with that if I didn't know that if it wasn't a writer that I trusted that I had read before. About 2 years where I couldn't read anything else. And fortunately, just like this last month, that's kicked loose again, so I can read new voices, and that's fun. Thank you.
What kind of books would you recommend in your genre, or at least in the fantasy genre, that you'd want them to read? Like, for me, I'm a huge Naomi Novik fan. I love Spinning Silver, Uprooted. Like, I love that. What would you...
So both of those remind me a lot of Robin McKinley's books.
Yes.
And Robin, bless her heart, if she would write 1 million books a year, I'd read every one of them. But she's a very slow writer, and so I was very happy to see Naomi with coming in with hers. Naomi's a wonderful voice, and her voice delves right into that same kind of warm, cozy kind of fantasy that I really, fairy tale fantasy with real people in it that I really like. Let's see. I just read Cold Iron. I've forgotten the name of the author. He's an Orbit author. This is his 4th book. I think it's the first book of a new series, and I found it very intriguing and lots of fun. And it was the first epic fantasy I've read in quite a while, so that was neat. to recommend people in our own genre, Anne Bishop. Although Anne, the thing about Anne is that she doesn't write like anybody else. So you can't use her as a measure of the genre. You can just go, oh, yay, and read them and enjoy them. But if you're looking at Tanya Huff's Blood series, are amazing. And she did that 10 years before anybody else made it big in the urban fantasy, in our iteration of the urban fantasy. Laurel K. Hamilton, you can't write an urban fantasy without reading Laurel K. Hamilton and Jim Butcher and Charlene Harris and Kim Harrison and I'm forgetting some people. Alona Andrews. She writes the Kitty the Werewolf series. Carrie Vaughn, thank you. Yeah, so you know, write what you love. If you don't love urban fantasy, there's no reason right now to write it because it's not as hot as it was maybe 10 years ago maybe. Write what you love, and that's really the best advice I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What about you, Anne? What do you recommend and absolutely adore, love in the fantasy genre?
Oh, Charlene Harris, Alona Andrews, Patty Briggs. Julie Cherneda.
Oh, yeah.
Who writes science fiction as well as fantasy, but
Lois McMaster Bujold. I can't let that go by without saying her name. Yeah.
Yeah. I am not a fast reader, so my immediate list of people is very, very small because I've had to read The Black Jewels several times over the past few months, and not a whole lot else.
I'm like you, actually. I'm lucky if I can get 2 books in a month, which would kill Patty.
Yeah, oh, that
too.
would just kill me, yeah.
I'm so busy with writing and doing other things, and I have a little son and a wife, and it's tough.
I have been blessed that I read fast. I don't speed read, but I read really fast.
Yeah.
I read, I think, something like 900 words a minute. And that means I can get through most books. I can get through in an evening.
Yeah.
So, and Ann Peters, Sparky, my assistant, is the only person I've ever met who reads faster than I do.
Wow.
And I've been a proofreader for over 40 years, so.
Oh, you can't read fast.
You can't, yeah.
You know, my ability to read fast is gone.
Yeah, it's the editor part in me maybe that slows me way down.
Yeah.
Yes.
First, I just wanted to say thank you for your work. I'm a huge fan of both of your series, so I love them. I wanted to ask you a little bit about writing paranormal fantasy today. So what a trend I see is, right, as the world gets explored, the powers get bigger, the scope gets bigger. How do you corral that as a writer so that, right, when you start off the series, you have a very kind of approachable, engageable character, and at the end of the series, you have a god. How do you keep your characters human? Or
Power creep.
Yeah.
Power creep. I think, you know, there's some people out there that do that very well. Alona Andrews is a writing team that does that extremely well. They start out with really overpowered characters, really high-powered characters. Overpowered is wrong. Really high-powered characters, and they carry it through beautifully all the way through. It's amazing. I really love them. Jim Butcher does it well, and he does it sort of like you would do in a D&D game, in that you just throw bigger and bigger and nastier and scarier things at them. I mean, the last one, he was involved in a jewel heist. I hope I don't throw this for anybody. Involved in the jewel heist of Hades, you know, and they had a really lovely talk in which we discovered that Hades' dog, Carabas, is really named Spot, because that's what it means in Greek. So, and it is Carabas. We say Cerebus because we learned how to pronounce Latin wrong or Greek wrong. So, but Anne and I both, neither one of us do power creep very much. Anne's characters, well, okay, I stopped. The Black Jewel series, I bit my tongue. I don't do overpowered characters. I find it much more interesting to have characters who are way underpowered going against big baddies, and then it's easier for me to put them in jeopardy. So most of my characters, they grow and they change and they learn, so they get smarter and they get more skilled, but they don't get generally more powerful very fast.
And for me, you know, Patty mentioned the Black Jewels. We started out with a queen who was immensely powerful, just, you know, wipe out the world kind of power.
But she can't boil water.
But she can't boil water. She can't boil an egg successfully. She can't call in her own shoes using magic. You know, the basic stuff that everyone else can do, she can't do because she's too powerful. And what she wants, she has taken this power and accepted it to protect her world from the enemy. But she doesn't want that power. She doesn't want to be that alone because the power isolates her from everyone. She doesn't want it. So in terms of power creep, it's like you start with someone who is immensely powerful, but recognizes the huge price that is paid for that power.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question.
Hi, I'm also a big fan, so thank you both for your writing. So I'm curious, there's the books that you guys write, and there's the books that we all read, and those might not be the same thing. And so I'm wondering...
Shouldn't be, actually.
Well, yeah, so that's what I wanted to know is if you guys have to grapple with that, or how you approach that in your writing, knowing that what we individual readers are reading is not necessarily what you're thinking you're putting on the page.
I'm always kind of surprised when people say, "Oh, you did this," and I go, "Really?" Because I tell a story, and if I am doing it right, I know that there are layers and textures that are underneath this simple story that the muse is telling me I am telling, you know, because my muse is very tricky. It goes, you know, here, writer, nice little carrot, simple plot, easy characters, come on. and then I get sucked in, and, you know, once I'm too far committed, it says, ha, 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 ha. You know, there's going to be all of these undercurrents. But I'm telling a story, and the people, the readers, usually are the ones who find the undercurrents. And not all of them are undercurrents that I'm aware of, because if I was aware of them, then it would be like this conscious preaching of, you know, I'm going to foist this idea on you, and I'm going, this is really boring. I hate books that do that. So
No soapboxes.
yeah, them soapboxes.
Right? Nasty soapboxes. Get them out of there.
Yeah. So generally, I think the reader does see a different story than I am aware of.
Yeah, because the reader's meeting you halfway.
So,
right?
Oh, yeah.
Somebody much smarter than me said that a book is the second most intimate thing two strangers can do. And I think that's right. And as a reader, you bring all of your experiences and where you are right then, and all the things that are in your world when you pick up a book, and it changes the book that you've read. I can't tell you how many times I picked up a book that I read like 10 years ago and realized it was totally different than the book that I thought I was reading 10 years before. And that's something as writers that you all should keep in mind when you have reviews or when you have friends read your book, is that they're bringing themselves into it, and they may get out of it what you don't suspect. And the trick with being one of the differences between being an amateur writer and a professional writer is that, for the most part, the story that you read is the one I intend to tell you. And I intend you to be at this emotional level, and I intend you to be that happy or that unhappy. So I don't very often have people laugh at parts that I don't mean to be funny, and I don't very often have people cry at parts that I don't mean to be sad. And that's a skill that you learn as a writer, is where to take your reader. But no matter what you do, you can't please everybody, and everybody is not going to get that same result because their experiences are different. That's just the way it is. And as a writer, you just kind of accept that and go on. And the world's a better place for it. Thank you.
Wow, that's rough after all those questions. But, Anne, I'm sorry, I'm not a fan yet. I will be this time next year.
You're
probably.
in for a treat. Okay. You're in for a treat.
Patty, I want to know where Mercy, how you became knowledge enough for us to get the realism of being a Volkswagen mechanic.
So this happened. I was planning her character out as a series character, and I wanted to give her a job that she had to go to every morning that was really grounding. That's something that she could do. Something that if she didn't go to her work, that she wasn't going to be able to pay the IRS, you know, that kind of thing, to add tension. Because one of the things as writers, we are all looking at how to put tension into your novels. And that's a wonderful, kind of very human kind of tension to put into a story. Buffy the Vampire Slayer did that very well. You guys, I have a calculus test tomorrow. We need to get home before 2 o'clock in the morning. I know we have bad vampires to kill, you know, that kind of thing. So so I was looking for that, and I realized that in the backyard we had 2 Opel GTs that my husband was trying to turn into one working unit. And we've had Volkswagens. He had Volkswagens his whole life. His parents had like 8 kids, and the only thing that they could stick them all in that was economical was a Volkswagen Vanagon. And we inherited one of their Vanagons, and we drove it, I think, another 150,000 miles. I think when it died, it had 300,000 miles. And we've had Jettas, and we've had Passats, and we've had just about everything. And they're quirky cars, especially like the ones with the engines in the back. My husband was a pretty good backyard mechanic, first opened that Volkswagen Vanagon, and he goes, "Do you realize that the radiator is in the front of this?" I should be able to tell you, I think it's 22 feet long, the front of this 22 feet long vehicle, and the engine is in the back, that it's cooling, and we have a bubble in it somewhere that we have to get out. And we found out from some other Volkswagen enthusiasts that what you do is you back it uphill. You get the back uphill so that the air bubbles will come up and you can get them out of the cooling system. So
you're burping your Vanagon.
We are burping your Vanagon. Yes, exactly. and there were just, because we'd had them for so many years, we had just these really funny stories. I drove up one time and I said, I went up and it was like right the time the mechanic was closing the shop, and I said, "Hey, our lights go off and on in this Vanagon, like weird. Like you'll turn them on at night and like the interior lights will go on, or the exterior lights will start going off one by one. What the freak?" And you know, I was worried about wiring and stuff, because in a Vanagon there's a lot of wires and there's a lot of miles of wires in there. And the mechanic looked at me and he goes, "Have you tried rotating your fuses?" And I went, "What?" He said, "Rotate your fuses." He says the European-made Vanagons have a copper fuse, and if you have them anywhere with moisture in them, they get verdigris. And so you rotate them to get the verdigris off so that your lights will work again. So they're just quirky cars. And so once I decided I wanted her to be a mechanic, I thought, oh, she's got to be a Volkswagen mechanic, because I kind of know all these stories. My husband was a pretty good mechanic, and we knew several good mechanics, so I had more stories to mine for. So it was just a really good, rich place for me to stick her. And it was an unusual, it felt like an unusual career for a woman. That I liked and I understood. So that's where that came from. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm short, sorry. So I write stories. I love writing ever since I was a kid. I have a bad tendency of side characters becoming a main character, or like a best friend of my main character. Is there a way to...
You bargain with them. You say, you don't have room in this story to be a main character. I will write a story about you, but for right now, you just need to be the third spear carrier and hold the spear and do your job in this story. And you can write that down. You can write that promise down. Sometimes that helps. And you say, I will write a story about this character, and he appears in this page on this story, and go back to it afterwards. But I find that actually worked really well for me.
Okay, because one of my characters has this best friend, and I didn't know what to do with him because he's not a main character. So just add him into a different story? Or
so is this a character that's trying to take over your story? Is that what you're telling me?
No, so they met at school, and they've been like best friends since like forever, but isn't there.
Okay, so there's several things you can tell me. There's no chemistry between the characters if he's in this thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they are friends, but my main character is more like a big sister, motherly figure for him, but there's no actual chemistry.
Okay, well, chemistry in books means a lot different thing than it does in real life. They don't have to have a romance going. That's fine. They can still be best friends. In fact, that's cool because you're avoiding a trope. So make them best friends. Does his best friend have a role in your story?
Yes, but not until like another book.
Okay. Well, then
after
they can
my
just
first.
be the best friend character.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. As long as you make the readers feel like that's a real person, give them some depth. But they don't have to be a main character when they first come on scene. That's fine.
So have it developing throughout my
Sure.
books. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's the joy of series writing, right? Yeah.
Thank
Good.
you guys.
Uh-huh.
Hello again. I love both of your series, all of your series. They're great. Thank you so much for coming. My question is about naming characters. When we read a lot of books, sometimes the names, they come from history, they come from, their Latin origin meanings, and it means something in a book. But how do you guys work on your names? Do they just come to you, or how long do you have to think about them? Do you change them, when you're drafting a lot? Or
Tolkien will rot in hell for Sauron and Saruman and Eowyn and Erwin. Okay, he will just rot in hell for those.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to let Anne answer the rest of it. Go ahead.
I read a lot of name books because I will start out thinking about characters or what would be in the world, or if I have different races, sometimes I will choose names that are from this country specifically for each race and then work my way through, or I play with things. In Wild Country, the Western, if you start thinking about it, I have characters who are named Wyatt, Morgan, Virgil. There's also a pair of brothers whose last name is Bonnie. So I was playing with the names of gunslingers and lawmen and a lot of those. So you think about what your world wants to be, and you kind of have fun with the names. In the rest of the other series, Tess was a name that came up, and it meant harvester of life. And I think it was Greek, but it meant harvester of life, and harvester meaning as of cutting the grain and harvesting the goods and all of that. But my brain being my brain said, what if that's literal? What if we have a character who harvests life? And all of a sudden I had Tess, who is a harvester, who has great hair, really. I want Tess's hair. You never have to wonder about moods. But so I read names for places. I will look at the atlas and play with moving syllables or deleting syllables or altering syllables to get a name that I like. I've made up names by combining words together, and then would get an email from someone that says, I have never seen our family name in a book before. Where did you find it? Well, sorry. So, you play. Basically.
Right, right. And Name the Baby books are awesome. If you're writing fantasy, I would suggest that you make sure that they look pronounceable, even if they don't pronounce them the way you would. Like my first book, her name is Arlorn to me. I've heard, or Arlorn, thank you, Arlorn to me. And I've heard people say Arlorn, and I don't care. It's okay. They felt very comfortable knowing that they know how to pronounce the name. That's important so that your readers don't stick on names. I recommend that your names look alike and start with different letters. I can't have any more A's or B's or C's, Adam and Bran and Charles, right? I can't do any more A's, B's, and C's in my books. I had one book in which all the characters' names for some reason started with M, and I had to go back and rename everybody. But there's you know, things that are important. In some ways, names are very important for your characters because, you know, if I say the name Charles, I have in my mind exactly the kind of person who would go by Charles instead of Charlie or Chuck, right? Or if I have, just based on people I know, if somebody's named Gwendolyn, I just have a picture in my head of what a Gwendolyn would look like. She would be refined and she would have probably white hair because Gwen is white in Welsh and things like that, right? And those things are undercurrents that add richness to your books, and don't ever dismiss them. But don't struggle over it either. And I wrote 2 short stories back to back, and both of them named the main characters were named Thomas. One went by Tom, one went by Thomas, and I tried really hard to change those names, and they wouldn't change and have the book work. The stories work for me. So that's why I have Thomas, who's the werewolf in Seattle, and then or Tom, the werewolf in Seattle, and I have Thomas, who is a Chinese vampire, and that's just the way they worked out. So. Yeah, don't fight the muse, but names are fun. Relax, enjoy them.
One of the things I did for the Earians and the Black Jewels was all of their names, the male names, ended in VAR or NAR. So anytime you saw that, you knew the race. And that can be a helpful shorthand, too.
We out of time.
We are out of time, but
So sorry.
let's do a speed round real quick. We got 3.
Go ahead.
Any possibility of visual story adaptions for either one of you as far as your work goes in the offing?
Yes, but it's a secret and I can't tell anymore. But I could have said that 14 years ago too, so take it with a grain of salt.
Go.
Do you guys have a say in keeping the narrations or narrators for your audiobooks?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, and I love mine.
I just have a quick kind of selfish question. I've been working on a book for like years now, and I'm at a point where I need to hand it off to somebody, and that's the scary thing for me. Where do you find, I mean, I know you guys have editors at this point, but when you were in that position, how did you make that jump? Where did you find somebody, like, who do you reach out to?
Okay, do you have friends who read books?
Yeah.
Read the kind of books you like to read?
I think so, but...
Okay, then I don't know.
Yeah.
Just find friends.
Find friends who, okay, or find a writer group. And anytime somebody's editing or giving you feedback on your book and they start out with, I don't read your genre, but ignore them.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay, so, but look for writers' workshops in your area, and you'll probably find them. If you're writing genre fiction, you're right here, right now, and we have science fiction and fantasy conventions are a great place to hook up with other people who read. Book signings are a great place to hook up with other people who read what you want to read. You don't necessarily have to have somebody else who writes. You have to have somebody else who reads.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And as Patty said, at conventions and things, some of my closest friends I met at conventions like 20 years ago, and we're all published writers. In fact, the 3 of us got our first books published within 6 months of each other. But we met at conventions and commiserated with each other about how hard it was and what tips you could find and all of the things that you want to know. So this is a good place to start.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
I would advise against jumping in and paying for an editorial service right away because you don't know who they are and you don't know how good they are. I've seen several people who sell themselves as editors that are terrible.
Okay.
So be careful.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your questions. Thank you, Patty and Ann. Good job.